The fear of God. What does that mean? Have you ever found yourself afraid of God? Do you see a difference between Jesus and God the Father? Many people find themselves fearful when they think of God. They want to avoid him. Have you felt like that? Years ago, I went to hear a famous American preacher speak, and he was talking about his father, who was a very violent man. He was violent to the mother, and he was violent to the son. And sometimes the mother would step in between the two of them to protect the young lad. And the preacher said, you see, that's what Jesus is like. He steps in between us, human beings, and an angry God to try and keep the two apart and make peace. That was years ago. I'm sure he's changed his mind about that. But have you ever felt like that? What does it mean when the Bible says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom? Well, I wonder, have you ever stood outside and watched a sunset? I'm sure you have. And you've watched the sun as it goes towards the horizon, and you've seen the colours rise up, the sun become brilliantly red, and then the amazing colour going out across the sky, across the clouds, and you've watched it slowly sink through the horizon, and you've gone, wow. And something has happened inside you as you've watched it. And you just go, wow, that is beautiful. You see, that's what it means when the Bible talks about the fear of God. It's that sense of saying, wow, that is beautiful. Just look at that. There is something of glory and beauty in it. It is wonderful. And that's what it means. In the Bible, it means that we learn to look at God and go, wow, there is such beauty there, such glory. One day the disciples came to Jesus and they said, look, we've got one thing to ask you. Will you show us the Father? And Jesus looked at them and said, show you the Father? Don't you understand? When you've seen me, you've seen the Father. You see, Jesus said there was nothing he said that he hadn't heard the Father speak. Every word came from the Father, repeated by Jesus. When he healed the sick, when he showed such care and compassion, he was accurately, perfectly reflecting the Father's heart. He said he could only do what the Father was doing. When you see Jesus, you see God. Some years ago I was doing a series of meetings, and at the end of the first meeting a man came up and said, look, I've got a problem, could I talk to you about it? But unusually I sensed God saying, don't talk to him at the moment. And the second meeting came, he did the same. The third one came, the same. The next one, I sensed God saying, you can talk to that man now. So when he came quite close, I engaged him for a moment and said, what was it you wanted to talk about? And he said, no, I don't need to anymore. And then he said, you see, when I came, I arrived with a real problem with God. I just found him so fearsome. I could talk to Jesus, but I was scared of the Father. He said, over the last several meetings, I've actually met God, and I've discovered he isn't who I thought he was. He is beautiful. He's amazing. He looks exactly like Jesus. And something rose up in me, he said. I want to follow him. There is nothing to be afraid of. And this man, who was quite a bit older than me, said, you know, I have always been a worshipper. I've always gone to church and I've always been sincere. And all these years, my idea of God has been a false image. And for years I've worshipped a false image, and now I realize it. And all I want to do now is know more about this beautiful, wonderful God. Do you have a false image of God? The false image always looks different to Jesus. The right image always looks exactly like the heart of Jesus. If you have had the wrong kind of fear of God in your heart, lay it down now. Just put it down and say, I don't want to go back there again. And begin to worship and to pray and ask God to show himself to you in truth and beauty. And there you will find joy.